Well, hey there. In this video, I want to show you the different stages that I go through when I want to draw the figure from imagination. So if I don't have a model in front of me or if I don't want to use photo reference, I'm explaining to you the skills that you will need to have mastered in order to come up with a pose from imagination. Before we dive in, my name is Carolin and I'm the owner of Kira Studios, where I teach classical drawing to lapsed artists who might need a refresher of the fundamentals so they can reconnect to their creative voice and keep drawing as much as they want. If that sounds like you, be sure to subscribe, get on the Insider's email list, and stay connected so you can get these weekly videos directly into your inbox. The drawing process begins in my sketchbook where I combine drawing images from photo references that I saw that intrigued me. And as I'm drawing those reference pictures, I then allow my imagination to go wild and come up with figures that are strange and that just come out of the response to the reference images. So in this set here, I came up with this lady sitting on this musk ox and it really intrigued me. And I then took it further and fleshed it out into a finished piece. So the question for this video again is, how do I get to this result without necessarily needing a figure to look at? So let's go through these different skills that we need to practice one by one. So here I'm beginning a brand new pose, and the very first marks I'm making are random, they're playful, and I'm not putting any guidelines around them aside from what does my hand want to draw, what kind of marks does my hand want to create. And that might sound a little bit silly and non-directive, but we want to begin with something that feels good to our hand, so we start with joy. And then we take it further into something more realistic. So here, the next thing that I'm now doing is I'm taking these random lines and I'm asking myself, how can I make them into something humanoid? And I start that process by bringing out the torso shapes first. So rib cage shape and pelvis shape in their simplified oval state. And how do they interact with each other? See how there's a squishy side on the right here, and a stretched side on the left? So that is a key element to first capture. Once I have this torso situation figured out, I put some landmarks like the spine and maybe the dimples at the base of the spine. And then I get to play with the limbs. And I literally am playing here. I'm testing things out. Do I want this arm to stretch out straight? Do I want it to reach over? And I'm trying it on for size. And since this is an imaginative process, that play component is really important because when we're playing, we're tapping into that more creative part of ourselves. If we're approaching this with a rigorous, more structured mindset, then we're not going to tap into our more creative ideas. So here again, I'm playing around with possibilities for the arms. Now, as you see me move further down the drawing, you also see me deal with some other skills, and those are understanding the muscular anatomy and how that is affected by gravity. So here, by dealing with the glutes, I need to understand that if there's pressure applied to that muscle mass, it will get squished and compressed, and it kind of buckles out to the side. And then the more relaxed part of the glutes, the upper glutes, they're more sagging and plump. So that I understand because I understand the muscles around the hips as well as how gravity affects it all. So I'm weaving in and out between placing lines to get the direction, then making those lines into very simplified shapes. So look at the shape of the arm, for example, very simple channel. And then I start to play by placing more complex shapes on top of that. And those complex shapes are based on my understanding of anatomy, like this arm right now. I understand that there's a deltoid muscle at the shoulder, and I picked the version that's more tucked, and so I made that more specific with my understanding of muscle anatomy. So right now you're seeing me figure out how is the head oriented. And I don't do so by drawing a bunch of details on the head. I'm just placing the ear and thinking about the major structures like the cheekbone And then I leave it at that and I move on. So I don't need a bunch of details at this stage. I just need some key landmarks. And speaking of landmarks, that is what I'm working on right now as well. The elbow. You see those dimples on a straight elbow? We have these indentations at the elbow joint, and that is what's called a bony landmark. And I'm connecting that to the bony landmark on the wrist. And as I'm drawing the hand, I'm not drawing the full detailed hand with wrinkles. I'm just drawing the simplified structures. So my main advice for you is study how do I simplify the figure. Just how you would simplify the head at first, like you learned in previous lessons with me. You do the same thing for every other body part too. What is the most simplified way to draw a foot? No toenails, no hairy toes, just the simplified structure. And you can add some key landmarks again just to spice it up a little bit, but the landmarks should be explaining the orientation of the figure, not just be visual fluff. And if you can, and if you're interested, you can add some shadows to explain where the light is situated. So I chose to explain that the light is coming from the top left. I'm adding a little bit of interest with a hair shape, and that's about it. So let me do the same thing one more time with a different pose, running you through this process. I begin with random marks. And as you do this, it's really useful to have a pencil that you love working with, where you just love the way it feels. So now that I have the strong diagonal, it made me think, oh, okay, standing pose, frontal pose. And now that I've decided on that, just based on these random lines, I'm thinking about the torso shape yet again. So how is the rib cage leaning? How is the pelvis leaning? And then I move on, but I already know kind of what I want with the torso. I'm deciding what's happening here. Is there a compression? And is there a stretch on the other side? So that is like that big dynamic that we always have to address in the torso shape. So here's the simplified version. I have that standing leg, I have my simple shapes, and now I can play with what do I want to do with the rest of the pose. Do I want to have the arm down? Do I want to have the arm stretched out? And again, my guiding factor here is joy, what feels good. Here I'm fleshing out this idea of the torso shape a little bit more precisely, and I do so by using landmarks. I'm using the sternum and the thoracic arc, so that ribcage arc in the front. I'm using the center line, and I'm using my collarbones to indicate which way the body is turned in the top half of the torso and which way the body is turned at the bottom half. If you want to learn more about how to do that, watch the video I'm blending in at the top right now, and it'll talk about using the bean to explain that dynamic nicely. So for the head, I'm simplifying it into this very reduced down version that you see me draw right here. If you want to learn how to do that, there's another video on top that tells you about the simplified head structure. Now, what I'm doing here is explaining you how I understand the muscle anatomy that's happening around the neck. So I needed my landmarks, that clavicle bone to behind the ear, and I understand because I've studied this, and you would have to study this too, that there's a muscle called sternocleidomastoid, long name, right? But when you study anatomy and you kind of memorize the muscle names and muscle locations, when you come up with an imaginative pose like this, you can then fill in, you can connect the head shape with the torso shape by linking it eloquently with your anatomical understanding. So let's move down the pelvis. We begin with understanding the pelvis simply as its simplified form. Just how we're understanding the head simply as a simplified form, we put some key landmarks on it, like the dots on top and the dot in the middle. So those are the frontal hip bones and the pubic arc. And by placing them well, we've now explained that this pelvis is rotated away from us to the right. You see how powerful these landmarks can be? I don't need to draw fat pads and pubic hair and whatever else you think you might need. You just need some good landmark placement to explain the orientation. And then here, once I have my major structures placed, I again fill them out with my understanding of muscle anatomy. So I have a boxy knee, and I then flesh out what's happening above the knee with my understanding of the quads and the adductor group, and how at the knee itself you see a lot of the end of the femur bone. And I'm just kind of thinking in my head with some cross contouring what the volumes are. And I'm using these kind of drawings just to bring something that's in my head onto the page. And then I decide, is that really like it? Does that really look like this in real life? And sometimes I hit it right on the nose, and other times it looks strange. And when you end up having this feeling, well, now that looks strange, that means you have to go pull out an anatomy book and see if you can find a similar pose and see what it really looks like. So here at the arm, I simplified it into cylinders. I simplified the hand shape, and I'm connecting that simplified cylinder with the chest by my understanding of the shoulder muscles. So my muscles, the muscle shapes, are becoming my linkages, if that makes any sense. The trapezius muscle is linking the shoulder to the neck. Again, that ear placement is really useful in explaining the orientation of the head. Now I'll draw in that eye socket, a little bit of the nose, good enough, moving on. And I wanted to add a little bit more about what I just said. Sometimes these thought exercises that you go through in these drawings turn out really good, and other times they show you where your weaknesses are. They show you where you don't quite understand what the body does. And rather than being annoyed at that, you can take it as an encouragement, like, okay, now I know what my next practice session should be about. We want to balance drawing from imagination and drawing for joy with drawing for practice. Just like a top athlete practices technical stuff and then they get to compete, which is probably like more like performance. So we do the same thing as artists. So let's go through this one last time. I already have the direction of the leg. Second step is fleshing out the shape of it. Next, I'm deciding what is the simplest orientation of the simplest form of the foot. So the simplest form of the foot is kind of like a wedge, a steep inside plane, sloping outside plane, and that is then connected to the lower leg with this ankle clamp. So if you simplify the ankle, you have this boxy structure, and that boxy structure links up to the wedge structure of the foot. That's what I'm thinking about. And if you know about anatomy and you know about the ankle bones, you can dress it up a little bit more. So here I'm thinking about the knee now. I'm thinking about the knee as a cylinder and it tapers into a boxy ending. So again, simple shape. Next, simple form. And then lastly, anatomical detail. So the kneecap, and what muscles do I have in this area? What tendons are showing up? What fat pads are showing up? So all of this, I put this on the drawing in layers. So if you don't know about this, it just looks like it's all being handled at once and you're just drawing outlines, but in fact, you're drawing the figure from the inside out. So now you know that there's no magic to drawing the figure from imagination, but instead you want to practice these key skills over and over again until you can come up with your own figures out of your mind. And I want to hear from you now. Which one of these phases is new to you? Which one of these phases were you usually skipping or unaware of? I want to know this. Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to become a Curious Studios insider, get on my email list. I send these videos to you straight into your inbox every week, alongside with some fun commentary that will make you feel inspired and motivated to keep drawing. And as a welcome gift, you can choose between a figure drawing mini course or a portrait drawing step-by-step guide or a pen and ink drawing tool guide. So up to you what you want to have as your welcome gift. I just want to have you in my circle of drawing friends, and I hope to see you next week in the videos as well. Bye.